welcome back once again to another DF Retro Let's Play. I'm John Linneman and joined by my good friend Audi Sorlie.
Hey John.
How's it going today?
Pretty good.
Today we're playing something a little different though. This is the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the NES. This is pure 8-bit action, but this is perhaps not the version that people watching might remember.
No, so if you look at this title screen here, you'll notice that it says Gekikame Ninja Den.
If you can read Japanese, of course.
Right.
And that's sort of like the Legend of the Radical Ninja Turtles, or
Awesome
like
Ninja Turtles Radical,
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, and what's interesting about this is that at the time, you know, this is 1989, Turtlemania is kicking off. It's very popular in the West.
Right.
But not in Japan.
So in Japan, actually, the Turtles have not been introduced yet, and this video game actually serves as the introduction to the Ninja Turtles for the Japanese public.
Essentially the first commercial product for the Turtles.
Right.
And thus, when localized for the Japanese audience, it hadn't been decided, marketing-wise, what the franchise would even be called. So they settled on this name, which is, it bears some similarity to another game, which we'll discuss shortly, for good reason. But yeah, so jumping off right away, this is a notoriously difficult game.
It's very difficult, and as such, do not expect us to do too well in this run, but we'll try our best.
Yes, exactly. So, obviously, in developing this then, so this was licensed, I think, in 1987.
Yeah.
The lore hadn't been fully defined, specifically in Japan.
By 1987, no. The comic book was out in North America. It was an independent comic book. Cult status, obviously, very quickly, as it was an underground comic. When Konami licensed this game, there wasn't much to really look at. There was some action figure designs. There was a loose script running around that would eventually turn into the 1990 movie from Golden Harvest. But other than that, you know, Konami didn't really have a lot to take inspiration from. There was the cartoon, but it was only in its first season. It was a short season, so you had some characters out there. But in terms of, you know, a lot of the more popular characters from the cartoon, they weren't really there yet by 1987, 1988, when this game was developed.
It simply didn't exist yet.
Right.
And that's why there are so many different enemies in here that have no relation to anything Turtles related at this point.
Now you get Fireman, you get Chainsaw Man, these sort of things, but they really had to come up with...
You still have Bebop and Rocksteady here.
You do, who were introduced in the first season of the cartoon.
Absolutely. And there's April with her rather unique relationship. And this version of the game, if you look in the manual, it's actually noted that April O'Neil is Splinter's daughter.
Yes.
It's very strange.
So in the game's manual, it does mention this. I don't know if I haven't played this in like 10 years now, which is explains some of my gameplay. But in the manual for the Japanese version, it does mention that April is actually Splinter's daughter, and I don't know quite why this decision was made. But yeah. That's certainly an interesting part of Gekikame Ninja Den.
So, let's get to the other game I mentioned then. So, Getsu Fumaden.
Yes.
It's another Konami game from 1987, right?
Yes.
And it bears some striking similarities to this in terms of the general flow. You go from the overhead, sort of the overworld map, though it is completely defined with paths, to side-scrolling stages. There's similar sound effects, similar feel to it, but it's still a decidedly different game.
It's very different. It's actually one of Konami's kind of classic Famicom games in Japan. Yeah, I think what happened, I talked to the original developers a few years ago while researching this game for an article on hardcore gaming. And what they noted to me was that during this time, there was kind of like a bidding war for all these properties in North America and Europe as well. For these Saturday morning cartoons, it was red hot. You had Rescue Rangers, DuckTales from Capcom.
Yeah, Capcom had a stranglehold on the Disney properties, really.
You know, Konami would have Bucky O'Hare and stuff later on.
Naturally.
But the Turtles, when they licensed it, was something that just was rumored or kind of, you know, felt that was going to be big. But by the time that they actually kind of started looking at what do we do with this property, the second season of the cartoon was announced, and they really had to get something kind of quickly. And I think the decision that was made, you know, you weren't using engines so much back in the NES days, but the blueprint of Getsu Fumaden kind of served as the inspiration for this game, and does share a lot, as you mentioned.
Unfortunately, it doesn't share the technical underpinnings per se.
No.
So one of my biggest complaints with the game is the performance. So it may sound a little strange to say it, but on the NES, the overwhelming majority of games do actually run at basically 60 frames per second. Now there is some slowdown and flicker and some issues in plenty of games, no doubt, but the base frame rate is 60. This is a 30 FPS game, however, and that does result in a less responsive, less fluid-looking experience. In stark contrast to Konami's own Getsu Fumaden that we mentioned, which is 2 years older than this, and it does run at 60 frames per second.
That's right.
I suspect that the primary difference stems from their approach to enemy placement. Well, as haphazard as it may be.
So there's the enemy placement. There's also, I think this game uses a lot of layered sprites.
That's what I'm saying. You know,
Yeah.
it's the existence and the presentation of the enemies. There's a lot of sprites on screen. The NES has a stark limit, or a hard limit, on how many sprites can appear per line before they flicker. Well, how many can appear on line? Flickering is a technique used to work around this to allow all sprites to remain somewhat visible. In this case, so I think, and I may be wrong on this, but I believe by having the frame rate, they're essentially doubling the amount of time, or doubling what they can display, so you can have more sprites on screen with less visible flicker. Though, so, I mean, it's a lot of sprites right there.
Yeah, here you can see clearly the issue that the game just generates way too much on screen at once.
And that's a huge problem, both in terms of the visual and the gameplay design. It may sound cool on paper, but in reality, they sort of randomly spawn these enemies into every scene, to the point where you don't even necessarily see the same enemy sprites when you return to a scene. As we'll see a bit later, but sometimes you'll have a completely different type of enemy, even if they follow similar patterns. And so, it's the randomness of their appearance on screen that makes this so difficult to deal with, and the fact that they're constantly reappearing. It lacks the careful placement of other Konami games from this era, and in fact, the best 8-bit NES games in general. Oh, this is an actual jump still.
Oh,
but that's okay. It's a tricky one, as everything is in this game. So another thing about Turtles, this is based on, this does use a memory mapper. It uses Nintendo's MMC1, which was the first memory mapper for this. And mappers essentially increased the capabilities of the system via embedded chips in the cartridges. And being that this is fairly early, well, for a 1989 game, it's actually a little bit surprising to me that we're still seeing an MMC1 game here as
right.
the pseudo-sequel, if you will, Turtles the Arcade Game and the Manhattan Project, both use MMC3. And one of the key features that MMC3 brings to the table is sort of the ability to scroll a second layer, or sort of seamlessly integrate a second layer into the image. I'm not sure technically exactly how it works, but you can see it in action if you play like Mega Man 3.
From like the menu, right?
Exactly. The menu, just like Turtles, there's a black bar at the bottom. You have your life and your power meter and everything in Mega Man. Press start, this scrolls up smoothly onto the screen, but it's a static HUD that doesn't flicker, it doesn't cause issues with the game display. Whereas with Turtles, when too many sprites and tiles appear on screen, you start to notice that the HUD itself flickers wildly. I think this just comes down to the nature of the MMC1 and its limitations.
So this is the infamous water stage from Ninja Turtles 1. I always felt that this stage kind of got an unfair reputation in the internet age, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this goes back to some of the more colorful videos on this game.
Right.
And yes, it is a little bit challenging, and you do kind of have to nail down the order to do it efficiently, but it's really not any more difficult than what's to come in this game. The difficulty does increase. And honestly, there were other games that followed similar sort of tropes, if you will. A good example was Earthworm Jim.
Right.
There's those undersea sections. Like for me, it's not a big deal.
I know for you.
I'm well practiced at
Yes, I've seen it. I can attest to John Linneman's mastery. I cannot do those stages in Earthworm Jim. Yeah.
But so, I suppose this is probably easier than the Earthworm Jim segment.
It's certainly shorter. I mean, So it's not an easy stage. Let's not sit here and kind of say that it's easy, but
it's not.
It's not that impossible either. I mean, it's just simply challenging, but not to an extent that like it's unfair or anything. It's just it's a water level. It has water mechanics. We all know how this goes in video games during this era. It's floaty. It's slow. It's
specifically the timer, I think, that causes issues because it creates a sense of tension. And when there's tension, you tend to rush through the game and, well, perform worse. Which I suspect is the case for many that got stuck in this area. But, you know, yattane. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, the game is properly localized. I mean, it was made in Japan, but I suppose it was made primarily for the English audience.
It certainly was. So this was developed very much with the American audience in mind, which I think also explains a little bit of the difficulty of the game, because there was this sort of like idea back then that Americans liked it more difficult. It was also the rental market and such. But
that would become more severe later as well. But yeah, at this point. Ooh. This is a neat presentation, by the way.
Yeah, you can see his hand is actually outside of the TV frame. So I guess he's sitting. He's actually sitting inside the TV set.
I mean, I don't know what
they just didn't figure it out. Yeah, right. Okay. So this scene is actually also interesting because it does mirror the first movie, which wasn't out yet at the time of this release. So, but there is a scene in the first movie where Splinter does get abducted while the turtles are out turtling it up.
That's right, turtling it up.
That is a fantastic movie too, by the way. One of the best comic book movies ever.
Oh, I agree. It's fantastic. I mean, you could argue there's some cheesy parts in it, no doubt, but I think it's extremely well made for the time and better than it had any business of being.
Absolutely. So Jim Henson worked on the suits for that.
That's right, yeah. Certainly better than what happened in the third Turtles movie with those. Oh, it's terrible.
See, I actually enjoy the third Turtles movie more than the second, but let's not get into this fight.
No, and
we have a fight on screen right now.
I don't really like the second one all that much either.
No, I do not like that either.
They are not great films. Now, I will say though, so by now I think if you haven't already played this, you're starting to get an idea of what the flow of this game is. And this is actually, I think this is an interesting design from a conceptual standpoint. Even if it isn't implemented well. So this idea of having an overworld map that you explore and then going into stages, side view stages like this. Mm-hmm. I mean, imagine if Konami had been able to apply like, you know, the design chops that they showed with Castlevania, for instance.
Right.
Carefully placed enemies. So, you know, Castlevania, right? The controls in that are relatively sluggish. Or I wouldn't say sluggish, they're more like they're very deliberate. Your jump has a very specific arc. You can't change direction in midair. When you take a hit, you fall backwards. All of those things. But due to the placement of the enemies and the design of the levels, it is specifically designed within those constraints.
Right.
Here, between the random placement of the enemies and the weird jumps and the tile layouts, it feels like they just sort of slapped it together in a way that's not fun. Like, the jumps don't really test your ability to jump so much as to figure out the game's quirks. Like, to get over that gap there, you had to know that the Turtles have essentially it's like a layered jump mechanic.
So there's 3 layers to the jumping, yes. So if you tap lightly, you have a small jump. If you hold it a little bit, there's a medium jump, and then obviously if you hold it down, you get what I call the Contra Jump, which is just this
the nice spin.
The spins, yeah.
Oh, there's the infamous gap.
Yep.
That's been showing up in popular media for years.
Yeah, so you just walk over that, and really, why did they do that? I mean, it's really
that's emblematic of everything with this game. The design just feels so random. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
It really does not. I mean, I guess it is there literally to trick people into jumping and having to redo that section.
Absolutely. Now, there is at least some positive things to say about this, besides the conceptual elements. Music.
Music is very good.
The soundtrack is a high point, and I think it stands the test of time brilliantly. I mean, Konami's composers during this era were on fire. Pretty much everything that they composed is truly a banger. Pardon my... yeah. But it's, you know, and this is no exception.
No, I think you're definitely right. And also, again, it doesn't necessarily have, the familiar Turtles sound so much yet. There's some elements of it, but
Sure.
you don't have like the theme song playing like you would see in Transformers: The Headmaster or whatever. But yeah, in this game, you have a lot of great original music, which I do think most NES players still to this day kind of enjoy.
Yeah, even the the water section, it's challenging, of course, but it has that great underwater music.
Right.
The overworld section, it's very iconic, and I do appreciate that. And wow, looking at this again here, just as you're driving the turtle van there.
Yeah, one of the few things included from the cartoon, really.
That's true. In addition to Bebop and Rocksteady, I
Right.
suppose. It almost looks like Retro City Rampage. Like, this is the style that they kind of went for when creating that game in the modern age. It's fascinating to see. But yeah, I do appreciate this sort of angled top-down view. It holds up fairly well, I think, visually.
Yeah, visually it does. We haven't really talked too much about the differences between the turtles as you can play them.
Oh yeah, this is kind of a problem. It's another design flaw.
Yeah, so I mean the idea on paper, awesome, right? You get to play as your favorite Ninja Turtle, you get to work together with them. You have to kind of, pick and choose who's better here, who has more reach, all these things. However, the developers really didn't have time to implement them too well, so there's not enough differences between them. There are some strength and different, stats between them, but not enough that I would say the game really benefits from these differences. So, for example, Raphael, he has his size, but they're way too small in this game, and it really does not help too much.
Yeah, it's like he's using some garden equipment or like a salad fork or something. It's
Teenage Mutant Ninja Gardeners.
It's very, very strange. And honestly, Raphael's a terrible character in this game.
Yeah, he really is not useful, unfortunately.
Whereas Donatello here, pretty much the best. I guess there's no pretty much about that, actually.
No, he is the best by far, and you'll see speedrunners for this game really go to town with Donatello. Another thing about the turtles in this game is that they actually do get stronger with how many hits they've taken. So you see the life bar as it sinks. They actually get stronger, which is something that I don't know if it's even mentioned in any of the manuals or anywhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. It's not really a documented thing, but it does occur, which is why, like you say, a lot of speedrunners will keep their life at 4 blocks or under.
Yeah.
Very difficult sections.
Even one. I mean, even one.
Yeah, sure.
They'll keep it at that and just
very
run
risky.
through. Very risky. See here,
So,
fall down.
So this part is, for me personally, this is the part that killed the game.
Yeah.
Not the water section, but this section of platforming with this awful placements. Like, you notice how before every single jump they place a block low enough that you're gonna bang your head against it, which causes you to fall short. And beyond that, so you need to master the triple jump system that you mentioned. So is this like a light or medium tap to get over those jumps?
Yeah.
Which one is it?
So, sorry, I didn't hear you there. So to get over here, for example, you have to do the lighter tap.
So that's the smallest jump.
And really that's kind of that's the only way to do this.
So this time I'm going to talk through this section so that you don't have to, so you can actually
so I can
survive.
Focus on this.
You notice how the enemies have changed, by the way, as we mentioned earlier. So we have the firemen and those strange flying things versus the robots and the things that drop bombs on you, I guess.
Yeah, I get what the blimps, the bomb blimps. Yeah.
I'm holding my breath here. At least he just falls off into the water there.
They do, yeah. Some of them are nice.
I like the way the sewers look here. I mean, this is a nice looking section, and there's plenty of them actually. But you definitely want full pizza for Donatello. So what makes
Unless you speedrun, then you want no pizza to keep him strong.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's just
so unfair, right?
I mean, that's just this game in a nutshell. So now, what makes this specific section so frustrating is that you've just walked into another building. But if you die here at this point, you're transported back before those series of jumps that you just completed.
Yes, you have to do those sewers.
And we're actually playing the game on an analog NT Mini.
Yes.
So it's not exactly original hardware, but it's close enough, and we are not using save states. So, save states, I think, completely, I won't say they solve the design issues, but they make the game significantly more playable.
I'm just walking up and down here really to see if I could spawn a better enemy pattern, but oh, I did, finally. So, just to avoid getting too much
The fact that
damage
you
here.
have to do that is
Yes,
also very frustrating.
It is
It's
very
just
frustrating.
awful design. Now, this top section here in the city, though, visually, this I feel is one of the most striking areas we've seen yet, with those deep black shadows on the buildings in the background. The foreground is nicely contrasted against it. It looks great. But then, boss fight. It's a Shadow Turtle.
Yeah, so
Splinter hanging up there. Just concentrate, man. It's okay. I'll talk about the flickering rope on Splinter. Okay. Mecha Turtle.
one thing that's interesting about this fight is that we mentioned we'll try to do this.
Pay attention.
Yeah.
Before we discuss what's interesting. Oh.
We're getting there.
Holy shit.
Got it. Oh, got it.
I can't believe you didn't. Look at his arm flickering.
Yeah.
Wow. This is a high intensity game.
So yeah, I was trying to mention, in the game Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters on the Super Nintendo, you actually have a fight where you fight a Shadow Turtle on top of a rooftop in the search of Splinter. So I wonder if they kind of went back here to that and just kind of like, hey, let's reference this first game of ours.
Not impossible. I haven't really. I wonder how many staff were shared between this and the arcade game, actually. Oh man, gotta get that pizza. Because the arcade game, which was the NES port, the NES port of the original, they came out the same year as this. Okay, swing that.
The sigh.
Wow.
Oh man.
I hesitate to call it a sigh. Other than that's the sound I make when using Raphael.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, this stage is really where we're gonna see.
This is just a Gauntlet of Madness.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, earlier, I'm certainly not an expert at playing this game. More of a researcher on this game than I am a professional player. But as a kid, I always enjoyed it. This game did, I think we mentioned already, but this game did come packaged with the NES for a long time in the UK. So we had the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtle pack.
Oh, that's right.
So people buying the NES would get this game.
I should probably clear that up, though.
Right.
For those that haven't kept up with your Turtles history, in Europe, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were labeled the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles as a result of sort of a ban on ninja-related items, I suppose, and so they simply couldn't call them the Ninja Turtles during this specific era.
For us in Europe, the Bruce Lee movies famously had to change things around because he was using nunchucks in Way of the Dragon.
Oh yeah.
So they had to cut those scenes out, and there was something there where they didn't like nunchucks and these sort of weapons, ninja stars, or shuriken.
So yeah, as a result, it was the name, I suppose you could say, was changed and it stayed that way for a while. I don't remember when it resorted to being. I don't remember when it became the Ninja Turtles once again in Europe.
That I don't recall either. I think it was around the time where we had the Next Mutation live action series. I might be wrong about this, but especially
very possible.
When the Turtles 2001 series cartoon came out, I do remember that they were using the Ninja Turtle moniker. So somewhere this change was made, and also nowadays, you can release Bruce Lee movies and whatnot uncensored. Good. So the ban is no longer there.
Look at this nonsense.
Yeah.
The frame rate just tanks like a stone here. As soon as this, the flickering, the slowdown.
I haven't used them yet, but you can see I also get these sub-weapons, these shurikens. And,
how useful are those in the grand scheme
so
of things?
they can be useful. It has more to do with just my concentration level here that like I keep forgetting.
Right.
But they can be very useful. Later on in the game, you get some magic scrolls, which basically gives you like a Hadouken.
That's cool. So again, that's almost
very
like
strong.
the sub-weapons in the Castlevania games,
Yes.
if you will. Oh yeah, this part this looks so Metal Gear to me.
Yeah, it has a little bit of that feeling.
That bright purple background, though, that's an interesting artistic choice. So yeah, I mean, you might be wondering why we're actually talking about this game specifically.
Oh yeah.
Sort of a preview, if you will. Basically, we're working on an episode of DF Retro for some time in the future that covers the Ninja Turtles. No idea when it'll hit, but the idea is to go through the series. It is something where Konami shined brightly during their era with the Turtles, and there's more beyond that as well. I thought it would be fun to sort of just play and talk with this original game. But of course, we'll take a closer look at the series as a whole, and most importantly, the conversions.
There was many conversions of this game, believe it or not, for the microcomputers and the home PCs.
This was very common back then. I discussed, it's like the ZX Spectrum, the C64, the Amiga. Like everybody was making versions of console and arcade games for these micros.
Right.
And usually the results were terrible. In this case, pretty much every version outside of the original NES game is... I mean, this is arguably unplayable, but I don't really think so. It is kind of...
I wouldn't say unplayable, but it's very...
It's poorly designed, but it's still playable.
Right.
Those micro ports are basically unplayable, to the point where, I mean, infamously, the DOS version, the original
Oh wow, the
there,
DOS version, yeah. That we'll get to that someday, but yeah. Yeah, so the DOS version does have... so this is how the magnets work. Okay. So they do draw you to a
magnets, how do they work?
Yeah, well, in this game they draw you into the spikes. Yeah, so the DOS version has a very famous problem, and yes, we will be going into... Oh!
See, look at that collision detection.
Yeah, it is...
Top notch.
It is...
All you're left with is Raphael. And by the way, you only have 2 continues in this game. You haven't used any yet, though.
No.
So you're doing pretty good by Turtle standards, I'd say.
Yeah, we'll see how well we do in the end, but yeah. So
the
you
spikes
also
deal tremendous damage.
One thing you got to understand also is that when you hit the roof, you kind of lose. Yeah.
You lose momentum.
Yeah, you just sort of stop and have to.
It feels like you almost get stuck on the roof.
Yeah, very much so.
Again, terrible design. This really is not a good game, but it is an interesting one.
I do love it because it is a Ninja Turtles, and you know better than anyone really that.
Oh yeah, it's great stuff.
Yeah, my house is basically a temple built for the Turtles, but yeah, I mean.
Oh man, your life.
Yeah, we're living on the edge.
I foresee continue coming at any point now.
Yes, we will probably be utilizing a continue.
Welcome to Kaizo Turtles.
And
that's it. There was that pizza.
We have, yeah, we could have made it here, but unfortunately, did I come from? We'll go down here again. Yes. Yeah, this is just a brutal game. I foresee that some people watching this will just be like, no, this, he's not doing well. But wow, this is a challenging game.
If you've played it, there's always conversations about difficult games today.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh, Dark Souls and all that, and the From Software games. I refer to them I think of them as challenging. They put up a nice challenge, and it's very satisfying because they're well designed. This game is significantly more difficult than any of those games, I feel. Along with stuff like the arcade version of Gradius 3, which is a nightmare to play.
Yeah, that one, I would say near unbeatable.
Just about.
Would you say one continue?
Let's do one continue.
Let's do one continue.
Give this a shot. Back to Metal Gear Town.
You can see here, there's new enemies, and these are the multipliers. So they'll just turn smaller and smaller, and actually turn into the icon you see on the rope item Interestingly enough.
Gotta save memory somewhere.
Yeah, gotta
Did you
from
know
somewhere.
that the clouds in Mario double as the
See,
bushes?
this is the turtles cloud.
This is what we come
The
for.
small men on the rope. See, there they are again. So.
Yep. I love it.
So yeah, I got.
What a game.
What a game. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the differences here, and we mentioned that the Turtles were not introduced yet in Japan. Later on, the cartoon would come out on Japanese television in 1991 and be dubbed. Oh,
actually,
I forgot to pick up the ropes, of course. Let's go back.
Oh boy.
That's fine. We have story time here right now. Yeah, so they did eventually dub the Turtles, and it was a moderate success. It had its own manga, it had its own toy line. They eventually made their very own version of the Ninja Turtles, an anime running for 3 episodes on VHS, called the Mutant Densetsu, which has them transforming into these gigantic Chojin, like gigantic humanoids, green humanoids. Has a theme song by Hironobu Kageyama of Transformers Headmasters fame.
Great.
So
I will say though that I remember even the American produced show, I suppose, or at least partially. The original episode, I guess the pilot for it. I recall this having significantly higher quality animation than the rest of the series.
The first season, the mini-series as they call it, The Epic Begins, as it was called on VHS, did have higher production values, and it is animated by Japanese and Korean studio. Yeah, so it does have a lot of like anime feel, the very first season. But yeah, the anime itself, Chojin Mutant Densetsu, I think it was, is very different and has a completely different backstory. There's like a magical fairy and everything in that one. So
give that a look.
Yeah, I have the VHS at home, so let's do
it. By
it.
the way, right there, if you just stop and look for a second, look at what they've done with the art here. This confuses me. So most of the art is designed to be forward-facing, where you don't see the side per se, other than the shadow that it casts. But the blocks that you're standing next to have a perspective.
Yes.
Of fading into the background.
And these aren't really used anywhere else in the game either.
No, it looks very strange. It's completely out of place, and I wonder how that sort of that look would work with this game as a whole if they had opted for that instead. I don't know. It's bizarre to see.
Some people might have noticed I tried to jump. There is like this famous clip they can do here to go for the roof ceiling and then go kind of skip a bit of the level, but yeah, it's a little bit hard to trigger. So I'm not fully sure how to do it.
Wow,
still.
That was a good run there. The frame rate cratered for a second.
Yeah. So yeah, we were mentioning Turtles' popularity in Japan. So its own manga, its own anime. But it never really, it wasn't the juggernaut it was in the West, obviously. So when I went to Japan, I've been in a lot of Japan due to my job, and I always find it interesting to see whenever the Turtles pop up there, like at secondhand shops and whatnot. And I remember talking to a guy that had, he's worked in the animation industry for a long time, and in Japan, and I kind of asked about, hey, do you remember kind of the Ninja Turtles? And his first response was like, oh yeah, the video games. And he, you know, this is a guy who has worked on several animations from the mid '80s, and he was not aware that the Ninja Turtles was actually a cartoon property or comic book property or anything. For him, the only thing that mattered was the video games from Konami. That was how he knew of Turtles. So he was very surprised to learn this and Asterix was actually real properties in the US.
That is really interesting, actually, the difference in the popularity between them. Because, I mean, you know, in the US, everybody had these Turtles games, but obviously it was the show and the other merchandise, the Turtles cards, The turtle cards. I had a ton of those.
Did you have the Pogs?
I did not have the Pogs, unfortunately. I wish I did though, but you know.
I certainly had most of them. I still have them somewhere. So just making our way through this level again. We're back to the magnets.
Yeah, this is a rather painful section, I think.
Yeah, don't expect us to get through this level, folks. This is really...
This may be the end of our Let's Play today.
Well, it's really just to give you an idea a little bit about this game, its history, and kind of why we love it, despite the fact that we can't beat it.
It's one of those. I mean, it's the same reason, I suppose, that there's so much affection for like Spelunker.
Right, especially in Japan. Yeah.
Specifically in Japan, right? It's not a good game. It's not known as a good game, but still we love it somehow. Well, at least some people do. This is probably similar in that sense. I always get a kick out of loading this up and playing through the first 3 stages until I reach that point with the jumps in the sewer, and it's just, well, that's it. Oh yeah, this gets tricky as well because the enemies just flood out. Oh no. Eat the pizza. Oh gosh. This is very tense.
Yeah, you should see John on the couch right here now, like...
Yeah.
You're not even playing.
And due to the heat wave hitting Europe right now, we
Wow,
decided to play downstairs in a different room with the capture gear, playing on my older but still classic Pioneer Plasma. It's the last generation Kuro Plasma. It still looks pretty good. It's 1080p plasma. It's really good for retro gaming, actually. Other than, I suppose, the input latency could be better, but it's a solid display.
It's like it was made to play Ninja Turtles from 1989.
That's what it's all about. You're doing fairly well at this point,
yeah, I'm actually a bit surprised too. You know, I don't think we'll beat this level, but at least, you know, we're almost
Giving
at the
it a fair
Technodrome.
shot.
Yeah, we're doing our best here.
This really does look like something that would... If Metal Gear 2 had been ported to NES, I feel like that I could see it looking similar to this.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think the Ninja Turtles would appear in that game, though?
No. Did Ninja Turtles wind up on the MSX at all? I don't think so.
Yeah,
They
actually did.
Really?
Yeah, so we mentioned earlier, I think we did, we mentioned the
Yeah,
ports.
the other
one
ports
of
to
the,
the computers.
So we mentioned quickly that there were other ports, and one was the, I think I'm definitely done. So one of them was the Spectrum version, and the Spectrum version was ported to, or the Amstrad, I forget, but one of those was ported to, oh, we can get him back. We have the technology. Yeah, one of them was ported to the MSX, so it's shared with another console.
Oh, right. I'm sure that's a great version.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Gosh, this part is just genuinely terrible. The frame rate is down at 20 frames per second or so, is my guess. The whole
just
game
by
is
eye
running
count
in slow motion.
Yeah, I really want those scrolls. So these are the magic scrolls I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
The strongest weapon in the game. You really need them in order to get through this game. We got them, and I actually wasted one by accident. So here, look at this. Just look at this.
This is nonsense.
This is torture.
What a terrible design. There's just nothing.
And we did it.
You did it. Oh, wow. This is truly...
Oh, yeah.
This is something else, this game. At this point, I'm just curious to see how far you can get here.
I will try our best, John.
Imagine this game, but with well thought out controls and enemy placement.
Yeah,
I'm a little sad
you
they
mean
never
Getsufuma then?
Well, yeah, it's kind of that. Now, I really wish that this concept had been revisited at least once from Konami.
Right.
Because I really, I think this is genuinely interesting.
Well, when I talked to some of the original, so I actually talked to some of the original developers of this game back in the day when I was doing that.
The article.
Yeah, and the thoughts from them was generally that, you know, they didn't really think this was a bad game, but they just didn't have enough time, and there was a lot of, especially the differences between the Turtles was one thing that came up again and again talking to them. It was like they really wanted to emphasize the differences between the Ninja Turtles because they felt that was the strongest element of the property, and they couldn't get that done, unfortunately. And the game does suffer from it because I do think the levels were based on this difference. And when that's not in the game, you have an extremely difficult and unbalanced game.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose this doesn't really stick out as being... So it's the date, the release date that really sticks with me. 1989 is fairly late in the NES cycle, but even later in the Famicom life cycle. I always thought that this felt more like a Famicom Disk System game more than anything else, somewhat. It just feels at least 2 to 3 years older than it is. Mm-hmm. And, oh boy. Wow, the precision required there. This reminds me of the Castlevania adventure on the original Game Boy.
We did it.
But you did it. We are witnessing something special.
Did you ever get this far, John?
No, I've never seen this. Actually, the color palette here looks like Sunsoft's Batman game. Metal Gear.
Yeah, so this is the Mouser, the big Mouser. So this is also another element from the comic book and cartoon that made it into the game, was this enemy.
So one thing though to say about this is I think it's neat because it's probably just background tiles.
Oh yeah, it is.
With some sprite eyes and sprites, and that's, you know, they're able to create the illusion of a huge enemy using this technique.
So we're officially now at the second last level, I suppose.
I'm impressed.
Turtle Blimp, another element from the comic book, or rather the cartoon, not the comic book.
Yeah, they're
Have you ever read the original comic books at all?
Oh, I've looked at them back in the day.
Right.
Wow, yeah, I've never seen this. Okay, that spotlight, that's really cool.
Yeah.
It's an impressive feature.
But this is really where the game now will start to suffer a lot, because this stage is extremely difficult, and we are looking for the location of the Technodrome.
Yes, doesn't it move around?
It moves around, and it's so basically what they did in this game then, because it can't move, is that it's in a random location. So this level can be extremely long, or it can be very short, depending on where it is. See Sonic the Hedgehog there?
Oh,
making
yeah.
his appearance.
2 years earlier.
2 years early. And
Wow.
the floating jellyfish.
And Metroids.
Metroids, yeah. You're right.
The last Metroid is in this game. The galaxy is not at peace.
Oh yeah, so we are... Let's figure this out here.
Oh, the look of the game changes so much when you reach this section.
Yeah, now it becomes something a little bit more alien and weird.
It really does.
I think Metroid is a good comparison, yeah. It has this kind of like unsettling, otherworldly vibe here.
Yeah.
Right, so...
So you made it through that section.
Actually, I went in a circle.
Yeah, look at that. Oh, that's what they're doing there with the spotlight. It has the black tiles around. Oh, wow.
It's really cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it has its flaws, but it's a neat idea, and it actually kind of works. Very, very cool. This is definitely the point, though, when the game really starts to feel torturous.
Yeah, I cannot even remember too much how we do this stage, so please forgive me, Turtle Gods, but yeah, we are in uncharted territories here, so I cannot remember this part at all.
It's just in. I got a message from the Turtle Gods. You are forgiven.
Alright. Yeah, so this is back where we are, but I feel like I'm supposed to go here. Oh, okay.
Do something? You were already down here.
Yeah, but I didn't go further down.
Oh, that's right. There's another section.
Wow, okay. Of course.
This almost reminds me visually of the old PC and I guess Amiga game Barbarian.
Barbarian. I remember Barbarian. Wow.
That was one that actually they used the PC speaker to produce a voice sound effect.
Yeah, so
the title screen.
Here you can see this entrance could have been the Technodrome, but because it's not, it's empty, and we have to keep looking around. I was hoping the Technodrome would be here. I don't think it matters if I go back in and out. No.
Technodrome.
Let's kick shell. Surefire sign that shows that we've been playing these games way too much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so the Technodrome boss, if we find it, and the subsequent Shredder fight are also just absolutely unbearable. Back to Sonic here.
Yeah, so this section here with the spears and the, oh man, this whole thing.
This whole thing sums up this game quite well, I feel, at this point.
But I think, you know, you really can see, though, at this point that the early section with the swimming just wasn't so bad.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Difficulty.
Yeah, what comes up is just so much worse than that.
It really does get so much weirder. The whole vibe just changes so dramatically.
So we are still searching for Technodrome here.
There's just all kinds of chaos down here because that's how it goes.
That is how it goes in this game. We are coming up to another section which
All right.
could have the Technodrome or could not. So let's
find out.
Let's find out.
Come on, Technodrome.
It is not the Technodrome.
The TDM continues. But not for you, the viewer. We should play a little game on how much longer will it take to find the Technodrome.
Yeah, this random allocation of the Technodrome is really annoying. I'm sure there's a way to figure it out in terms of frame precision and whatnot in speedrunning, but I am not quite there, I have to say. Heading back to the surface.
It's interesting how these a lot of these Konami games, like so there's the ladders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Castlevania, there was the steps. Castlevania and Game Boy, there were the ropes. It's always fascinating to see the different mechanics used to ascend or descend in a level.
It's kind of like a Konami trope, is what you're saying.
A little bit. But it differs between them, which is fascinating. The helicopter thing, I guess it's a large, it's a single chunk of tiles or sprites, or that is so weird the way they did that.
You can see it has a large, thick, like black frame
Yeah,
around
exactly.
it too. So whatever they're doing is, yeah, it's interesting.
Have you been down here yet?
I have not been down here. And just look at what's awaiting me here. This is madness. Two of the strongest enemies in the game, and just, wow. Ooh. So we got him out of the way. Let's see if we can get this guy. Oh, okay. We have to use some scrolls here, though. I would like to save them as much as I could. Oh, wow.
And then the Metroid got you.
The Metroid did get me. We are...
You're doing great, though, honestly.
Yeah, well...
Making it this far.
Thanks so much. Whoa! Okay, I have not seen that before. So, there's no other choice. Oh, and I died.
Well, there's a choice of that.
There's a choice of me dying. And wow, we are not in a good spot for this level.
This could be the end.
This is probably the end, my friends, but I'll take it as a badge of honor to have come this far without no practice or anything, so... Tonight, Shredder shall dine on turtle soup, it looks like.
Well, perhaps we should consider calling it here then.
Yeah, I think this would be a good spot. I mean, we didn't get to show you the end of the game, but you know what? Let's Let the people
remains
discover
a
it for
mystery.
themselves.
It remains a
Yes.
mystery.
Please play through this
Game
game
over.
and see how does it actually end.
Yes.
Is April Splinter's daughter or not?
Exactly. So yeah, it's an interesting sort of a relic from a time, a game that a lot of people played. I certainly did, but it's not great. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of interesting elements to it, and I do think that there's potential there that was unrealized, and I would have liked to have seen Konami give it another shot.
It's certainly a game that has enough collective nostalgia around the world that I think it will always be remembered for the good and for the bad. Do you remember, by the way, that this game was actually the first licensed game to appear on the Virtual Console?
That's right, and it sold for like an extra,
it was an extra 100
Wii points.
Yes, that's right. So
Yeah.
it kind of came back in the 2000s with some sort of another notch on its name.
But if you made it this far in the video, you may put another notch on your DF Let's Play belt as well, because I think we're going to wrap it up. So thanks for joining me for this insane playthrough, Audi.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for letting me play it.
But of course, and if you enjoyed this video, of course, be sure to like and subscribe, ring that notification bell at the top, and follow us over on Twitter. And until next time, stay radical.